Francisco Franco was not supposed to be the original leader of the nationalist forces in Spain. Instead, it was meant to be José Sanjurjo, who died in the stupidest plane crash in history, which resulted in Franco leading the Nationalists. Franco then became the dictator of Spain and ruled until 1975 when he died. Sanjurjo was going to be traveling by plane, but insisted on bringing his heavy luggage on a small plane, which the pilot warned him would be too much for his plane to carry. Sanjurjo, being the idiot that he was, ignored the warnings of the pilot and wanted to fly with that pilot in that specific plane because he felt the pilot would be daring enough. He also insisted on bringing his heavy luggage as he needed proper clothes to be Spain's new caudillo. Of course, this resulted in his death. Let me say that again. The plane crashed because Sanjurjo brought too many clothes aboard his plane. Like, how dumb is that? With that context in mind, we must now beg the question, what if Sanjurjo wasn't a moron and lived to lead the Nationalists in the Spanish Civil War? In this alternate timeline, Sanjurjo will listen to the pilot and opt to ride in a larger plane, as apparently nobody could convince this guy to abandon his luggage and clothes. So, how would a Sanjurjo-led nationalist faction be different from a Franco-led nationalist faction? Well, Sanjurjo was a hardcore monarchist, unlike Franco. He wanted to lead a Carlist-only coup against the Republic. He was an Alfonsist, and part of the Spanish Renovation faction which sought to restore King Alfonso VIII to Spain. Although neither the Carlists and Alfonsists got along, Sanjurjo seemed to be in favor of siding with whichever monarchist faction was viable for overthrowing the Republic. Despite his monarchist leanings, he described himself as the next caudillo of Spain before his death. This would be important after the war, and I'll pick up on it later. With Sanjurjo, the Nationalists would still win the Spanish Civil War as the Republicans were unprofessional and were busy purging one another. Some things that could change during the war would be when the Nationalist victory comes and the levels of foreign intervention that occurs within the Civil War. The 1936 coup is likely not successful still, and the Civil War still starts. However, there are some things that Sanjurjo could change that Franco did not in order to make the war shorter, but we don't know for sure. This is just a guesstimation. Sanjurjo could accept the surrender of the Republicans in earlier 1939 than Franco had. In March of 1939, a majority of the Republican military, the moderates, liberals, socialists, and anarchists staged a coup against the communists with the intention of making peace with the nationalists and prevent more deaths. In our timeline, this peace was rejected by Francisco Franco. In our alternate timeline, Sanjurjo could accept this peace and have less of a white terror that had occurred under Franco. Another aspect could be less international brigades come to Spain to fight for the Republicans. The only way that this could happen would be if Sanjurjo didn't accept aid from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, or if they just didn't offer him the aid as he was trying to restore the monarchy and was not fully embraced by the Falange, which were the Spanish fascists. Without being openly fascist, not as many international brigades could come to Spain, but some would still come as the Nationalists had staged a coup in 1936 and people just wanted to fight for the Republicans. However, if Sanjurjo's Nationalists aren't offered German and Italian aid, then the war could be prolonged as Italy had given a lot of support to Franco in our timeline. But I feel like Italy would still give some aid, as Mussolini saw any foreign war that Italy could be tied to the winning side as would be a great victory for fascist Italy. Considering all of the factors that could lengthen or shorten the Civil War, we'll just make the assumption that the war goes relatively for the same length of time for the sake of simplicity. Now that the Nationalists have won the war, what are the impacts on post-war Spain and World War II? Sanjurjo was very excited to become Spain's caudillo in 1936, which means strongman or warlord. He is a monarchist, but it's very possible that he wants to become an authoritarian dictator who rules Spain while having a monarch for show, but everyone knows that Sanjurjo would still hold the power, like a veiled dictatorship. Now, how does this affect Spain compared to how Franco ran Spain in our timeline? The White Terror that occurred in Spain still happens, but there aren't as many people killed as there were in our timeline, as Sanjurjo still purges communists, socialists, and anarchists, but at least Sanjurjo would not purge liberals, moderates, and Spanish Republicans if he had accepted that 1939 peace agreement. Also, in our timeline, the purge lasted throughout Franco's reign into the 1970s, and I don't think Sanjurjo would last that long, but I'll elaborate on that later. It's unknown how Sanjurjo would treat the Basque and Catalan separatists, but I feel like he'd probably purge them. Now, how would the Spanish government under Sanjurjo be different compared to Franco? Well, there are a number of aspects. Franco named himself as head of Spain and created the Francoist brand of fascism in his dictatorship over Spain and continued the White Terror throughout his reign. Under Sanjurjo, there is a veiled dictatorship in Spain with a puppeted monarchy that supports fascism, but not as much as Franco did. Also, Sanjurjo would not be as chummy with other fascist dictators such as Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini as Franco was. But, there's still some levels of support there. Now, how does this affect alternate World War II compared to our timeline? Well, Sanjurjo could either stay neutral like Franco did or join the Axis, as he wasn't the brightest dude in Europe at the time. If his dictatorship stays neutral, then the scenario goes pretty much the historical route, except Sanjurjo dies before Franco did. For joining the Axis, this results in Spain invading France with Germany and Italy in 1940. Why would Sanjurjo join the Axis instead of Franco if he wasn't as fascist-friendly, you might ask? Simple, because Sanjurjo was pretty opportunistic and he's also an idiot. Spain would join in after a German victory was ensured and Sanjurjo invades the southeast of France. Spain is able to occupy some of France and take security responsibilities for that territories, which would continue to overstretch the Spanish military, which, although experienced from the Spanish Civil War, is exhausted and needs to live on German support. Regarding the North Africa campaign, Spain would want to control all of Morocco from Vichy France, and the Spanish send forces into Libya with the Germans to support the Italians after Operation Compass. Rommel could possibly win at the First Battle of El Alamein, but can't take Egypt just because a few Spanish divisions are present. That does not really have much of an impact on the North Africa campaign, just because there are a few Spanish divisions. In Spain, there are a lot of clandestine operations undertaken by the SOE and other organizations to support rebellions against Sanjurjo. Spanish troops are sent to the Eastern Front and prolong the front, but it's unlikely that the Axis win in places like Leningrad or Stalingrad. Again, similar to North Africa, just because there are Spanish divisions present doesn't mean it alters the war. Operation Torch occurs in 1942 and includes Spain. It's possible that Sanjurjo's Spain switches sides Romania style, or that Sanjurjo is overthrown by the Spanish military or by rebels. Each of these options has a different scenario to it, but the point is that Germany has to divert troops into Spain, and it's possible that Spain is the Allied opening for advancing into France instead of Italy or D-Day. Keep in mind the Spanish military is in a pretty bad state in 1939 and is overstretched and undersupplied by 1942 and likely wants a change in leadership. And that is where I'll leave this scenario today. Of course, that was just one possibility for if Franco wasn't the leader of the Nationalists and Sanjurjo didn't have a stupid plane crash. What do you think would have happened had Sanjurjo led the Nationalists instead of Franco? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.